Hi everyone, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University.
Today we'll be teaching you how to play Marvel Age of Heroes, game designed by Rodney Thompson, who designed the classic 2012 game Lords of Waterdeep. This game is published by WizKids.
Let's get to the game.
In Age of Heroes, each player plays as a team of X-Men, training, recruiting allies, and fighting against the enemies. A competitive game, players will be competing against each other to be the one who makes the most contributions to the fight and scores the most points, both from the battle and from other sources of points on the side. The game has different playable scenarios, and when the scenario you've resolved reaches its conclusion, the game is over. I won't take you step by step through setup, and it's going to vary depending on which of the three scenarios you choose to play: Children of the Atom, Fatal Attractions, or Fall of the Mutants. Children of the Atom is recommended for first play. Above the main board, you'll have the Institute deck, which will have some cards added or subtracted from it depending on which scenario you're playing, and there'll be 4 of those cards dealt face up. Each player will have a disc on the turn order track, a score marker at 0, and the score track doubles as a round tracker. Below the board you'll have the missions in some combination and 1 or more parameter cards which describes this scenario. At any time, one of these combination tiles with both sides face up represents a villain that you can attack for points. Each player has a player board, all of their coloured discs to be used as general markers during the game, and 3 resource cubes which are set at the highlighted starting values on red physical, yellow mental, and blue willpower. In basic setup you'll use the blue side of your board. In the advanced mode you can flip to the gold side, which will give you a special player power. You'll have the number and type of hero pawns depending on your player count. Here, for example, if it were a 4 or 5 player game, I would have 1 Jubilee and 2 Wolverine pawns to make up my team. I'd get a 3rd Wolverine at 3 players, and another one of each at 2. Any that aren't in use are returned to the box. You'll have a hand of 3 Institute cards, and start with a number of Evolution cards, which are upgrades which you can make through the game to your X-Men. In the basic game, you'll use the ones marked recommended. While in the advanced game, use any combination of your team's joint evolution cards up to the numbers shown here. You're now ready to play. Age of Heroes is played in an unfixed number of rounds, and each round is played in 2 phases. First the Institute phase, and then the Mission phase. The core mechanism in each phase is worker placement, and a player will have either their hero pawns or any student pawns that they've collected through the game for actions in these phases. The difference between the two is that hero pawns will come back to a player's player board at the end of each round. Student pawns will be discarded after the round is done. There are also some actions available to a hero pawn which are not available to a student, and vice versa. The Institute phase is played in turn order, each player taking turns 1 at a time until all players have passed. On your turn, choose any one of your pawns and place it into an empty action space in the Institute phase section of the main board. This means any of the pre-printed action spaces along the side or top of the board, or an action space on an ally card in this top row. Regardless of the size of the box, there may only be 1 pawn in each action space. You'll then immediately resolve the action of the action space you've chosen and leave your pawn there. There are 7 different locations in the Institute phase area. These are the X-Jet, Headmaster's Office, Medical Bay, Cerebro, Danger Room, Research Lab, and Dormitories. There can be many action spaces within a location, and that's fine. These are just grouped into locations for some effects in the game. We'll now look at all the different Institute phase action spaces. These 3 spaces here are all about gaining the basic resources: 4 red, 3 yellow, or 2 blue. This also reflects their scarcity in the game. Red is easier to get than blue. When you gain resources, simply increase your cube on the matching track. You have a maximum of 10 per resource and any excess is lost. There are 2 other action spaces in the headmaster's office where you can go to get basic resources in a smaller quantity. These are available only at the higher player counts. You'll have this space at 4 players and both at 5. The top 2 action spaces at the headmaster's office give you a way of gaining new institute cards. First, this icon means you must place down 1 card into Xavier's protocols, meaning you take any 1 card from your hand and place it face up into this card row. If you have no cards in hand, you skip this step, and if the card row is full, then you choose any 1 to discard before placing your card down. You then draw a number of institute cards based on the action space you took, 3 or 2. These cards may be a combination of cards from the face-up card row and cards face down from the top of the institute deck. There is no hand limit in the game. The next actions all give you ways of playing cards from your hand. At Cerebro, you may play an ally card, that is any card with this green icon in its corner. Place it into any empty ally slot, either in the top row or down in the extraction zone, and then mark the card with a player marker of your colour. This is now a fully functioning action space in that location. Any player may place a pawn there to take its action, but if a player other than you places a pawn there, you gain the reward printed next to your player marker. A similar effect is gained by the first player to place a pawn in the X-Jet for a round. I'll talk more about the X-Jet action a little bit later, but this icon for the first player to take it allows a team-up card, which is anything showing the blue icon in the top left corner, to be played into one of the empty team-up slots. Again, mark this with a player marker. It will give you a reward in victory points if any other player comes and uses that action later in the game. The medical bay has 2 action spaces where you can go to play an event card. That is, a card which has this exclamation mark in the corner. Simply choose a card from your hand, resolve its effect, and then discard it. As a secondary benefit indicated by these arrows here, you get to choose your position in the turn order for the next round. Place one of your player markers in any available space in the left column, and these will ultimately slide across to the right column to form next round's turn order. This action lets you play one of your evolution cards. Take one of the small evolution cards that you chose in setup and then play it face up into the leftmost open slot below the bottom of your player board. If there's a resource cost for that slot, you must pay that now. This now gives you a special ongoing upgraded ability, usually associated only with the specific hero pawn for that card. For example, this is one of Jubilee's cards, so it will give you a bonus when placing one of your Jubilee pawns, which wouldn't be gained for a Wolverine pawn. The last of the printed action spaces is the X-Jet, and this may only be used by hero pawns, not by student pawns. As described before, the first player to place here in a round gets to play a team-up card. But otherwise there is no immediate effect when placing in the X-Jet. Instead, what you're doing is choosing your turn order and your number of pawns that you'll take into the mission phase in the second half of the round. Because it's only the pawns who are in the X-Jet who get to be assigned during the mission phase of the round, and they'll be assigned from first place to last place. Note that placing a hero's pawn into the X-Jet is not considered assigning that pawn. This is an important distinction when considering the effects on evolution cards and some other effects in the game. It's only when that pawn is moved from the X-Jet to a mission action space that it is considered assigned. Those are all of the basic Institute action spaces, but I'll show you a few more effects that you might find on card actions. Some actions instruct you to place a token, either a resource token or a victory point token, on another action space. This makes that other action temporarily more powerful. If I now came here, I would resolve the normal effect of that action and gain 1 yellow resource before returning that token to the supply. Some cards will give you bonuses based on your other heroes at this location. This is where the definition of a location is important. In this case, it's the medical bay, so these 3 heroes are there, this one is not. Some cards allow you to copy the actions on other spaces, or even to reassign your workers to different spaces. And cards with red banners down the bottom give you ways of scoring points at the end of the round based on where your heroes are assigned. Here, for example, it would be points for each X-Man card that you're assigned to, and these are indicated by these designations up here. In this case, these 2 would count as X-Men, this one would not, and so these 2 would each score 2 bonus points. On your turn, if you cannot or do not wish to assign another worker to the board, then you pass. Your Institute phase is over, and if you haven't previously placed your next round's turn order marker, you place that now. Once all players have passed, you'll proceed to the mission phase. The mission phase is where the X-Men will fight the enemies and score the majority of their points. This is also a worker placement phase. It takes place in a maximum of 6 turns, and on each turn, the next player in the queue on the X-Jet will assign that pawn to an action space on the mission phase part of the board. This could be a printed action space on a mission tile, the action space on a card in either the team up zone or the extraction zone, or this big action space here. This is the only action space in the game that may accommodate any number of pawns. When defining locations for the mission phase, the entire team ups area is one location, the extraction zone is one location, and each villain tile is a location of its own. Extraction zone actions work much like Institute phase actions. If you use an ally card, you'll resolve the effect on the card, while this major action space gives you one of 2 options for what to do. The options on this space will change as the game goes on. This is the tile in place for rounds 1, 2 and 3. It will flip to this for rounds 4, 5 and 6, and progressively become more powerful as a way of moving the game along. Mission tile action spaces are one of the 2 ways of attacking the villains. A space is only available if there is an action space on the left and it joins up to a number of victory points and damage icon on the right. To use one of these spaces, place your pawn, spend the resources showing on that action space. Here it was 4 red, 2 yellow and 3 blue. Then score the number of victory points for that damage. Here it's 12. And cover that damage with one of your player markers. This action and this damage cannot be done to that villain again. The other way to damage an enemy is to use the action on a team up card. Choose the team up action and then spend the resources at the top of the card. So here 6 red and 4 yellow. Then resolve the full action. When you see one of the 4 damage icons, this means do that sort of damage on an available mission tile. So here it's Omega, there's only 1 Omega available, so I would cover this one up with a player marker and score 9 points. You would also resolve any other effects on the tile. This one gives you an extra 5 points and forces you to place a 3 victory point token on some other action. These can give you a lot of flexibility when facing villains. Here, for example, if I had no blue resources, I could still use this card to do damage on a villain whose tile required blue. When the last damage icon is covered on any villain, that villain is defeated. Go through the following steps. Firstly, there'll be a reward for players who have their player markers on this villain, and each player will now gain that reward. If it's important, resolve these in the current round's Institute phase turn order, with the first in turn order gaining all rewards before the second in turn order, and so on. Next, if there's a student on the mission tile, you'll discard it. This doesn't happen very often because students can't board the X-Jet, but there are some events and effects which could make it happen. Next, any hero pawns who are still on this tile get a bonus assignment to the extraction zone. You'll also do this in the current round's Institute phase turn order, but this time each player moves their first pawn before each player moves their second if applicable, and so on. These reassignments can only be to open action spaces in the extraction zone and behave like any normal hero assignment. Players can now take back their player markers. The tile or the mission parameters will then tell you what to do next. Here, for example, this is a minor enemy in the first scenario, and it tells you to replace it with a challenging enemy. When Juggernaut's defeated, you would flip the final test face up if not already done, but in the absence of any other instructions, discard Juggernaut. With Mr. Sinister, it's defeating this villain which ends the game. Once no pawns remain in the X-Jet, the round is over. Resolve any red bar end of round effects on actions, and any end of round upkeep on mission parameter cards. All assigned pawns, including those on mission tiles, are returned to the player's supplies, while all assigned students are discarded. Remove turn order markers from the round just finished and replace them with the next round's turn order. Advance the round marker, and if you reach one of these red bordered spaces, update the extraction zone action. Finally, if there are fewer than 4 cards in Xavier's protocols, then refresh up to 4. And if there are 8 cards in the protocols, discard them all and replenish up to 4. If a mission tile or parameter card tells you the game ends, then the game ends immediately. Here, for example, this effect occurs as part of resolving the special ability for defeating this villain. The game would end before anyone got to reassign their heroes to the extraction zone. The player with the highest score wins. If tied, check your leftover resources. Whoever has the most blue resources wins. If still tied, most yellow, and if still tied, most red. If still tied, victory is shared. And that's how to play Marvel Age of Heroes. We hope that you enjoyed this video.
If you find this video useful, please help us. Hit that like button, subscribe and hit the bell, and comments below. Let us know you've been enjoying this video somehow. I'm also on Instagram. Find me there.
Comments, suggestions and feedback are all welcome in the comments section below.
Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.